I would say that I was unable to get through Star Carr on Tuesday. What I wanted to get through on Star Carr. So we are going to. I'm going to say that we are going to. Hang on a minute. Hang on. I just got to get that off the screen, and slight problem. Hang on there. Right. Okay.
I love Star Carr, and I've done a course on it.
Good. Right. So, Goff, any news from you this week, darling?
No, I haven't. Except apart from that little article on the news, Welsh News last night about the dig at Pembroke Castle, the cave, under the castle, and that wasn't very informative actually. But maybe we can look at that sometime.
Yeah, we did mention that the other week, and obviously any updates. I tell you what, Goff, if you can keep an eye on that, and then we will then look at Pembroke Castle, and I'll just see if I can dig something else out at the time. I think we've got a few weeks to go before the excavation is completed because it's a short one. So,
okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much for that. Over and out, Goff. That's really appreciated. What about you, Dal? Anything else you'd like to tell me today?
Yes, I did one of these online courses with Star Carr, and I'm absolutely impressed with what they do.
And Del, we're going to be doing this week and a little bit next week, so it's
lovely because I printed stuff off.
Good.
For Jessica.
Good. And you haven't had it back. Yeah, I know.
Oh, it doesn't matter because I've got access to it.
Good.
And all the museums and stuff.
So, Del, what we're going to do, we're going to try and add to that today. So thank you for that, Del. Right, who else have we got? Chris, thanks for your shekels this week. Anything you'd like to say, Arnold? Arnold, you'd like to say in Lantwick Major? No. Karen, I got your text. Anything you'd like to say in Lantwick Major? Lynn, don't forget your check. Anything you'd like to say in Lantwick Major?
No.
And Kathy and Keith, don't forget your shekels. Anything you'd like to say in Lantwick?
Make sure we have a break, won't you? We need a break in an hour's time.
Oh, okay. Look, you and your bloody cake. Shut up. Right. Steve, anything you'd like to say?
By the way, it's the trip in October all going ahead as per plan. Do we have any problems with that?
Yes, we've got a driver for it, so that's fine. It's all going ahead as planned in October. So yes, yeah, I think that's everybody. So right. So Del, quickly.
So before that, I just want to say that Dorothy gives her. She says she's sorry she can't join because she doesn't have the technology, but she still supports as best she can.
Excellent. And you know what? We love it. So give her my love and we're going to crack on. So today we are looking at Star Carr Part 2. Now, if I can look at my notes from Tuesday, when we were looking at Star Carr on Tuesday, I particularly was looking at the buildings, the two types of buildings at Star Carr. And the way I did this on Tuesday was really effective. Unfortunately, on Tuesday, we were unable to get through everything. We didn't look at the pendant that I promised that I wanted us to look at on Tuesday. We didn't look at the wonderful pendant, and the pendant itself deserves at least a good half an hour on it, a good 40 minutes. So if it gets to the stage that we're thinking, if it gets to the stage that we're thinking that, you know, we're not going to be able to do it today, then we won't do it today. We'll just hold that over to next week. And we got other Mesolithic bits and pieces that I want us to do next week as well. So, you know, we'll crack on with that. And the one thing about Star Carr is that the intrigue and massive importance of Star Carr seems to be growing and growing and growing. And I put my phone on the side so you can hopefully look at these wonderful images that we're going to be examining today. Now, I think the best way of doing this week is to again repeat what I did on Tuesday. So what we did the return into Star Carr, a new look at the archaeological evidence and reassessment. We did that as the second bit, and then before that, we looked at how they analysed some of the archaeological evidence from Star Carr, and that's what we're going to do first. So I'm just going to crack on the screen here. If it's looking side on, then that's fair enough. I'm going to go with what we got on the screen, and hopefully, okay, if we go there, hang on, I'm hoping that we can, this is a different technology, so I'm just trying to get everything, this is all sorted, hang on, and 1, 2, 3, there, bingo. Are you seeing this image on the screen? It doesn't seem to be coming up. There we go. Are we seeing this, Del?
I can see it.
Right, good. If I move the phone, if I move this way, are you seeing this side on, or is it not landscape?
Well, you can see a map. I see it.
Is it filling the screen?
No, it's writing underneath.
Right, all right then. Well, we'll just do it this way. Right.
Yeah, that's better. No, that's better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Looks like Florida. Yeah.
But actually, I've got to be honest with you. It is Florida. I can't sort of hoodwink you in any way. So, what we do know is that if as we look at the screen, that grey area there is the original archaeological excavations that were undertaken by Dr. Graham Clark in the late 1940s. Exploratory between 1948, 1949, 1950, 1951. And these archaeological excavations, the grey areas, was very much what we based the entire of Mesolithic history in Britain upon. What we do say about the Mesolithic period for decades upon decades was based solely on the word of Graham Clark. Now, I've got to be very careful on this because I've got to try and avoid being critical, because Graham Clark was a ground leader. He was a researcher in the field. What we understand from what he said is what we knew. But much of what he did write about in the 1950s, 1954, when he came out with his report, has been completely challenged. And our understanding of the Mesolithic period, particularly over the past 2 decades, has in many ways completely changed what Graham Clark said. However, he was the pioneer of Mesolithic archaeology. He was the one that gave us evidence that challenged everything before. Up until his work in late 1948, and then obviously through the excavation 1949, 1950, 1951, people just thought the Mesolithic period was a pile of flints in a load of different fields, and they were just hunter-gatherers. They really struggled on, and suddenly you got the period of the Neolithic and everything explodes. Well, we know that that's complete nonsense now, and Graham Clark knew that was complete nonsense. What we do know from Graham Clark's work and what we understand today is that the Mesolithic period was an illuminating, it was a revolutionary period where we've got agriculture, where we've got huge changes in animal husbandry. We've got buildings, we've got certain levels of mining, various different farming activities here, there, and everywhere, trade, and so on and so on. Many of which Graham Clark would have intimated back in the late 1940s, 1950s. So this map itself is of the area of Lake Flixton, part of Lake Flixton, the area of Lake Flixton where there is massive archaeological evidence. Now, if we go back into this plan, all the yellow dots there, they are within this area where we're finding a great deal of the Mesolithic finds. The grey areas here are the original excavation trenches of Graham Clark. If you look at the horizon of the landscape, even within this small box, Graham Clark excavated just over 1% of this landscape. So basing the whole of what we knew about Mesolithic, not a criticism of Graham Clark. Now, the whole point of what I'm attempting to do in this first session is to expand on one tiny little trench that was excavated, which is SC24, and then expand on a tiny little box that was excavated in SC24, which is on your plan there, which is on the eastern side of Graham Clark's archaeological excavations. The blue areas, the light blue areas, represent what was water back then. We are talking about 11,500 years ago, and the green represents the land. Now, the plans of the trenches are there. What we don't have is the plans of the trenches of the original excavator that discovered the site in 1947, a chap by the name of John Moore. Graham Clark gets all the glory for the excavations at the site, but it was, in fact, Jonathan Clark who actually excavated the site initially, who found the site. So what we do see is the blue trenches, were the trenches being excavated in the late 70s, 1980s, and the yellow dots represent the field walk-in finds over a wide area. Now, what we do see about the blue areas, and you can just see about the light blue areas, not the dark blue areas, is even where there is evidence of where the water is, there are still microlithic finds being found. And these microlithic finds may actually represent buildings that were constructed on the lake itself, Lake Flixton, as Graham Clark expanded upon with his excavations and his report in 1954. So the red trenches represent work that's been done in the noughties, in the 2000s. And what we will say straight up, in every single one of those trenches, every single one of the yellow dots, that is actually flint. There's evidence of flint being found at all those localities. But, B-U-T, but, in the red trenches, in the blue, in the grey, that's where we get organic stuff, which is vital to our assessment. But what we need to do, we need to hone in on that trench, SC24. Got it in your mind? That's where we're going to go. That is exactly where we're going to go next. So before we actually do think about that, let's just have a quick look at another image that gives the immensity of the expansive and valuable nature and the true onerous nature of the archaeology. In other words, what we do believe, even in that area, 1.5% of the landscape was excavated by Graham Clark. We've probably got about 3.5% of that landscape has been excavated, and across the rest of the landscape, we are still to think what is there. But unfortunately, there has been a deterioration in regards to the archaeology. Now, what we do see there is that the archaeology is so well preserved. They are seen in a trench at Lindstep, which is nearby, associated with Lake Flixton. We are lifting timbers for further examination. One thing I will say is that 90% of all the timbers that were originally excavated
by our wonderful Graham Clark, and all the other excavations by very wonderful Nikki Milner and her team in the noughties. Most of the timber's still on site because you just can't lift it all. If this was China, for example, we would have built an aircraft hangar over the whole thing. The whole thing would probably, I think, period was like. Fortunately, on a sub-political note, now we are seeing the drop in funding in archaeology by about 50%. So we do not have the resources to do anything of what I have just meant. In fact, we're seeing a huge change of people being interested in archaeology. So, you know, and the funding is therefore no longer with us as much as it used to be. So here we go. We're looking at Nikki Milner's, one of Nikki Milner's excavations. It's in black and white. Obviously, those that do photography know that getting sharp clarity of the artifacts without the bank of light and so on brings definition to the recording of the archaeological data within trenches rather than taking color photographs. This is why they're in black and white. These were taken in the noughties. So so what we've got there is a layer of the brushwood directly upon the timber. Now, what we are seeing is that square there. That square itself is being excavated in sections, and that's taken to the laboratory. And everything that we're going to discuss is within that square box there. And one thing that I said after I looked at this first part of the lecture on Tuesday was that it goes to show when you excavate an archaeological site without looking at every single grain, you're losing 90% of the fine detail as surrounded the rest of this bit of the archaeology. In that box, the archaeological data that they've excavated from the top layer all the way down, that there represents, they've already taken a cube of that above off, right? So that's another box in amongst the brushwood. So that's a section. They cut through that as a section, a box, and they excavate it within the laboratory. And the data that they've excavated within the laboratory is massively, hugely, illuminating. That's the best word, illuminating. So, this is where we are, and this is what we're going to look at. And now we understand what we're doing. So let's look at the next image. Bingo. What they're doing, they're excavating there and they're sawing the section, right? So they're sawing out the section. So they all the other timbers around have been removed for looking in the laboratory and all the rest of it. And then these timber, everything in that box, whether the timbers, bits of whatever, are going to be taken out on block. This is called excavating within a laboratory, just to block in the laboratory. The work was so intense that you're talking about the equivalent of 1 year's work just to excavate that one single block within the laboratory, using dozens of experts. It's quite amazing, the results. But again, it goes to show what archaeologists usually lose on an archaeological excavation. The analogy that I actually used on Tuesday was as follows. If you think about an average archaeological excavation, a poorly undertaken archaeological excavation with something managed by the University of Cardiff, where you would see them excavating at places like Killeen, and they would just remove all the tiles, just chuck them on the side, right? They wouldn't really float and sift anything. They would go down to the layer that they need. They would record that and put it into a report. Really shoddy way of presenting archaeology. But the University of York, on the other hand, have got a very, very professional approach
to how they look at the archaeological evidence. But even then, all the other data around this block has had to be done in the normal levels of archaeological exploration, where not all the finalities are looked at, except in this case, they're looking at that block. So exemplary, and up to you as a positive nature to the University of York. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at another image. And this is actually, I do believe this is actually St. Saviour Gate. This is, I do believe this is St. Saviour Gate. This is north of Coppergate. This is within the church bows in their laboratory. And that block itself is where we get all our next data from. This is what's been examined. Each single layer within that block are the layers that have been systematically excavated from Star Carr, layer upon layer over thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. One of the questions at the top of this today, as I had on Tuesday, was that I wondered I wondered at which point that what we see from this block, which is there it is, it's marked with a red little arrow. Maybe we can answer some of those questions. So this is trench SC24, which is on the left-hand side of Graham Clark's excavations, and they're actually sort of digging partly into Graham Clark's excavations in the bottom corner, and it's sort of overlapping to understand the level of archaeological data that archaeology over, isn't it 70 odd years? It's about 1949, I think that's right. Yes, that's about right. So the block there that we're looking at, and sort of we're looking at a nice little bit of detail, has been squared off, and this is what we're excavating with the archaeologist BT, legendary BT. The small square hole in the foreground is a sump from Clark's excavations. So there you go. So this is overlapping into Graham Clark's excavations to see what the changes have been in regards to the preservation and the why and wherefores within the data. So let's move on to the next slide. And what they're saying, to try and give you a little bit, so zone A is all the stuff above. Zone A is basically post Mesolithic village, platform, village, platform, whatever you want to describe it. We'll explain that afterwards. So it's a bit of a bone of contention with that. So we're in zone 2, sort of the sort of upper layers. That's what we're seeing there. Zone 2, sort of above brush wood layers. Again, looking at my next. So what we are then doing is that we're in zone 3 now, and zone 3 itself, where you can see all the brushwood and so on. That's the wood in the trench. Is basically zone 3 is just sort of the activity layers, and zone 4 and 5 is really into that brushwood. That's what we're talking about. So getting just sort of late sort of Mesolithic. Zone 3 sort of activity layers. Zone 4 and 5, we're really into the brushwood layers of the archaeological site, which is in the fourth. Front, so the all the interweaves find is what we can understand from all of the information that all of these layers have given us within the block that they excavated. You can basically see again in zone 4 and 5, sort of zone 3, that you can actually see an antler, a really well preserved antler there, as some of the wood and some of the archaeological data. That one of the things that we will see in the notes is that get my words out, is that over time, the artifacts which were really solid and, the artifacts that tell a story that Graham Clark told the story from, lots of them are actually becoming spongified, and they're losing their sort of calcium content, and because it's being eaten away by the acidic conditions of the peat. And as you know, peat eats away calcium, and when we look at bog bodies, all you've got are the flesh and the organs and the bones have been eaten away. The calcium's gone. So what we're seeing is that the acidic content of the landscape is altering now, today, this moment. Again, zone 4 and 5, the brushwood platform, there it is. So we sort of saw a little bit of that before. I said it was poking through. Zone 4 and 5, those zones directly in the block. That's what people stood on, lived on, worked on, whatevered on. And this is context 93. So if we remember, if we write context 93 down, right, which I'm going to do. And when we examine the charts, we have context 93. I really needed to do this today. I really needed to really needed to shout, and I really needed to say, look, this is what one of the types of structures are like at Carr. Types. The other type of site, which I'm going to say now, was on the dry land. So there's two levels of occupation at Carr. One is the platform that Graham Clark based everything on. He said that people lived on platforms, or he actually said people temporarily lived on the platform, they lived somewhere else. But now we know that they're dry land sites as well. So that sort of changes Graham Clark's narrative. But then again, if Graham Clark was to write another book and he was to sort of challenge us a bit more, he would come up with the same conclusion. So there we go. Now, what we do find is that this is zone 6. And zone 6, so is possible, what they now believe zone 6 is the remnants of material that have already fallen into the lake. And what's happened is they've laid the brushwood platform directly on top of it. So if we want to compare, so that's there, right? Context 93 with the occupation layer, what everything's going on there, activity and so on. And then what they're saying is that maybe the stuff had fallen onto the lake, so they actually built their platform directly on zone 6, like the big timbers that are evident on the site. That's what they're saying. This is what we're thinking. Maybe. We don't have all the answers for Carr, and why would we? One of the things that we've not really done last week and this week is we've not really looked at the lithic evidence. Last week I said, look, we're not going to look at the headdresses. You can read that up in James Dyer's book, Ancient Britain, which most of you have already got. Look at James Dyer and what James Dyer says about the headdress. It's fine. You can see him in a bit of a paradox with some of the information, and that's fine. But we don't need to do that. And we don't really need to do the flints from Carr. We want to give a the other artifacts that don't get credit within. Before Graham Clark's time, everything that we believed in the Mesolithic period was about flints. Now Graham Clark and Nikki and everybody else is really starting to tell us a lot more of the story. Taxa, Animalia. So what we're seeing, if we want to zoom in on this, we go to we look at all the layers there, right? We look at all the layers. Hang on a minute. So as we're going down from the top contexts, context 1 to context 2, what we can see is that there's very little in the way of animalia, and then starting to build in the contexts as we start to get deeper and deeper within looking at the archaeology. What we start to see is things are building, things are growing, and all that sort of understanding. With seeing mammalia evidence throughout this landscape, over these thousands and thousands of years. And note at the beginning, this is probably when the landscape it's losing its lake, it's losing its moisture, and animals ain't wandering across this peat bog. This is what this is telling us in the first bit, but it's sort of up and down. It's all over the place, in regards to animalia across the site over these thousands and thousands of years. Now, we don't have the context number 93 on there. This is going to 52, but obviously 93 is going to be off the scale with the mammalia evidence. But again, this is sort of examining all those layers to sort of understand what's going on. So what we've got is that as time goes by, there's more and more timber evidence coming up. There's more and more information for timber being deposited, either deliberately created, built up, accidentally, as the periods start to go on. And in these people in 22 is that, dry up when there's no real activity within the landscape. And what we started to see here, it's not really been a lake. It's not really been a lake until the past few sort of thousand or so years. Up until that point, what we do find, it was almost marshy, boggy up until very recent times. Not in the past few hundred years, but probably talking about is that we've obviously got to date these layers in regards to any sort of fen-like waterside evidence in these bits here. But what we start to see is a growing sort of deposition of waterside and fen vegetation. So it's more in recent times that it's the peat bog as sort of gone under the surface and has become ploughland, which is a very important point. Very important point when the landscape is really being drained, and it hung on to being a peat bog for a very, very long time, thousands and thousands and thousands of years after the likes of the Mesolithic settlement was abandoned, sometime around 10,000. Was it? I think it's 10,400 years ago, or those about. We won't do that one, but what we are going to do, and if we just quickly look at that, hang on a minute, just brush past that. I shouldn't have. So what we are talking about is the sort of ratio between inorganic and organic substances, and how that reactivity is within the archaeological data. And if we move on, and that reactivity within the archaeological data comes down to this. In the box that you've seen in the laboratory, now we couldn't really understand this, and we're still trying to work out what this means. We've got iron and sulfur residues exuding from the block as they're excavating. Well, that's really interesting. We wouldn't really associate sulfur within the deposits for a peat bog and within the layers of the archaeological preservation. But the iron is rather interesting, iron residues coming out, and that's really interesting. That sort of takes us into the bog oak sort of formation of the sesquite oxides, sesquic oxide reactivity within the peat bog. Now, this is more important than anything that we've seen, because if you can look at this graph, you can see the number of hours the archaeologists have taken to look at individual layer. So I've estimated 20 experts within looking at these layers. So there we go. Within the lab, layer 1, looking at all the components and the microscope. When I say layer, yeah, it's sort of layer BLO2. They've done these in blocks of 2, haven't they? So BL02, just I think we worked out. Did we work out about? That's about a day. So they spent about a day, all the experts, on one single one single sort of block. But as you start to go through, as they're looking at all the layers, the time they're spending on the layers, because of the level of archaeology on these layers, is amazing. So by the time you get to BL54, you're talking about in the region of 720 hours that all these experts spend on BL54. So you're talking about an equivalent of a week that the archaeologists spent on just this one layer in analysing all the components, which is amazing, But that goes to show what I've said. If you rush archaeology, which they haven't done with this layer, right, you're not going to get the data. If you take time within the archaeology, you're able to understand the layers. And this is why I'm really always critical of the shoddy work that they undertake at the University at Cardiff. And when they look at the wonderful work that's undertaken by the University of Highlands and Islands, by the wonderful work that is undertaken at York University, you can see the comparison. The data is going to be more credible when they're doing in regards to the wonderful site at Carr. So now we've done that, I want to look at the next part of the lecture. Right, so you can keep any questions for this. I might have a little bit sooner. I need a cup of tea, and I want to eat my porridge before it gets too cold. But I would like to introduce the next bit. Now, I'm going to explain this, and I'm not cheating by any chance of the imagination. I've taken an article from Current Archaeology, and I've basically said, right, I'm going to base the entire lecture on the article, but I'm going to expand on it, right? It's not cheating. It's basically, I thought I couldn't have done any better on this. So I've done this before, and this is what we're going to do today. We'll just show you, we'll just try and capture the images, and I've got the text here. So we'll just see where we go with that. So let's stop being so awkward, Carl, and let's just let's not do that. And there we go. Now we've already seen this image, and I was a bit awkward with this image last week, deliberately so, because this is an artist's reconstruction of life at Carr, where recent excavations have uncovered evidence of a thriving Mesolithic settlement. Now I've become awkward because when we look at the evidence from Graham Clark's excavations, it's sort of extrapolated that there was buildings on a platform and it was seasonal. Now we think that there was a platform, there was occasional buildings on it, but elsewhere nearby, there was actually a proper settlement that people lived permanently, which was opposed to what Graham Clark was saying, temporary. I think what Graham Clark was actually correct. He was very correct, because what he was saying, the evidence on the platform didn't seem to indicate that people would have lived on the platform in buildings all year, right? So what he was saying was that they would have been on the platform maybe in the winter months under the shelters working and stuff, and on the platform in the summer months out in the sun. And then he said, right, they must have lived somewhere else. They must have lived a long distance away. They must have travelled here back and forth to the coast, because they hadn't excavated the dry land site, which was excavated by wonderful Nicky in the noughties. So he was right, but he positioned the other site, which we now know was a permanent settlement, instead of Graham Clark's idea that it was temporary. right? So Graham Clark, up you for getting what you got right on your evidence, which is what we do as archaeologists. We base what we can on the archaeological evidence, and if we don't find the archaeological evidence, we've got to extrapolate elsewhere and use metaphors for other locations and other terminuses within the archaeological limitations. What we can learn from going back to the site that was excavated first by Graham Clark is that we are overturning much of what we had been taught of the Mesolithic period. But is it overturning? I don't like to disrespect archaeologists that I respect. And I'm not being disrespectful. What we're trying to do in archaeology is say, Graham Clark, you got that right. We're expanding. Love it. Love it. That's what we're doing. That's what we're saying. That's what I'm saying. So if you'd been alive about 11,000 years ago, or maybe longer than that, and there's a point I'd like to kick into, not into the long grass, I want to kick towards you guys, right? You can kick it back at me, right? I believe that maybe we may have had these types of settlements in the Paleolithic period as well. Oh, come on, Carl, you're talking aliens now, right? I'm not. You don't suddenly have settlements coming from nowhere. These people have evolved the way they build settlements over hundreds and thousands of years. Because the evidence has been destroyed by glaciation, doesn't mean to say they didn't have settlements, right? It's the same thing. We lived on Doggerland, and we haven't really found all the evidence yet because we can't bloody dive down there, but we know it existed, right? So, there's that. So we're living at Star-Carr 11,000 years ago. I said this before, I said this last week, we're repeating this little bit. You might well think yourself one of the luckiest people ever born. Dimly remembering stories handed down the generations and recounted by older members of your community tell of a period of intense cold when the land was frozen hard and little grew. Then everything changed. There you are, Garden of Eden, in the moment that you were meant to have been in. The earth warmed and melted. Trees grew and the woods and lakes brimmed with food. The Garden of Eden, the Lebensraum, the place to be. That was when your people came to settle by the large lake. That is your home. It was, this is a good place, but we're saying it. Why not? We're not saying Graham Clark was wrong. Actually, we're saying Graham Clark was right. Because I've already said in other lectures that this was a period of everything. There were people living permanently. There were people who sedentary. There were people living hunter-gatherer. There were people living as traders. There were people living as this, that, blah, 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 fannies around, right? Exactly the way people live today. Not everybody lives in a plush, wonderful house in Landsworth Major. Some people live in the back of their van. Some people live like me in a caravan. Some people, but I'm surrounded by beautiful views, landscape, and all the rest of it. I don't live in a town. You live in a town. Some people live on the space station. Some people don't have a home at all. Some people live in tents. This is exactly now as it was in the past. So everyone's right. And so proved to be, as they put down roots, built homes by the water's edge and gradually colonized the shore, so that smoke from campfires now rises above the reed beds as far as the eye can see. Now, we are going to go down the screen and we're going to look at this one. Love it. So what you're seeing is, it hasn't got all the little yellow dots around it with Mesolithic finds, but it does, because all the sort of chevron lines there, that indicates the true extent of the Mesolithic settlement. Bloody big. This is a sense of expansion. This is this is a time of big things. This is a time of something very, very different. You would think that this didn't happen until the Neolithic period. It bloody did happen in the Mesolithic period. And obviously, to build where these people built, they must have known, they must have had some Bélanger, la route along le plan de square. They must have known what was going on, right? Mon corps resiste encore. Let's scream for more. Let's see what we're seeing within the archaeology. And what we are seeing, Graham Clark's excavations, we're seeing excavations 2004, 2010, in red. And obviously the grey excavations in the it's not the 90s, I think it's the 1970s as well, 1980s. There we go. And you know, what we are seeing clearly is that we're talking about the terrestrial landscape. The yellow and the wet side living, that spoils it a bit. What we've done, we've moved away from the stereotypical wordings of the archaeologists, and we're saying, look, you know, it's about all of this, and then we're sort of saying lakeside living. It almost as if says that this is the only places people live. No, they lived everywhere, didn't they? So I like that little thing. Here we go. Love it. Look at that figure there. Carr, an area of activity at least 100 times larger than Clark's original lakeside platform. Yeah, we're all right. And a lot more, you know, Graham Clark could not have excavated the landscape. There weren't the resources. This was post-war British decline. This was when the empire was gone. This is when we didn't have any money anymore to do things. This was still a period of rationing. So I don't think the priority of the country was to excavate this site. And it's a mind my French, it's a bloody good job that didn't happen, because now we're getting all the other scientific stuff that was unavailable to Graham Clark. So such a scenario for the early Mesolithic would have been dismissed as fanciful less than a decade ago, having this truly cosmopolitan landscape, this truly mixed landscape. True tundra conditions prevailed in Northern Europe towards around 11,600 years ago. But then you got this banging on the door, banging on heaven's door. You've got a landscape of true cornucopia. You've got a landscape of true wealth. You've got a landscape that people are living. This is within the landscape as well, that trees is still colonizing. Trees are still growing, birches and pine woodland. But in amongst all of that, what we have is we've still got these true lakes. We've got these lakes like Lake Flixton. So the people we know are definitely active at Carr as everything's melting away, as the trees are coming in. And John Moore, the archaeologist, it says local amateur archaeologist, poof. John Moore, the archaeologist, finding this site in 1947. And now we've been joined by Bill. So I'm just going to have to try and muck things up a little bit. Let's add Bill on. Let's add Bill. If I can go back, and I'm going to need Goff to help me a minute, and I'm going to need to get back to those images. Goff, are you seeing that image?
I see a contour map, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one, lovely. That's the one I want to be. That's the way I want to be. So anyway, thanks for joining us, Bill. We're looking at Carr. So John Moore, the archaeologist, he's the one who finds all this. Now we do talk a little bit about John Moore, but I'm going to say this: if John Moore had not found this site, it may have been eaten away. All the peat may have been quarried away, as we see at Carr, drained, development and all the rest of it. We may have lost all this archaeology. So thank you very much, John Moore. Hats off to you. Everyone knows that Mesolithic people were highly mobile, moving about the landscape in small bands or of 2 or 3 families. well, we know that, but talk now of houses, settlements, and putting down roots, an anachronism that did not happen for another 5,000 years or so, when people began to farm the landscape rather than hunt forage for wild food. Let's reassess that. We've got settlements, we've got farming, we've got people living permanently. This is 5,000 years before the Neolithic. This is when people are living permanently at Carr. This did happen. Not that it didn't happen, it did happen 11,300 years ago. So what we do find is that the activities trying to keep the torch alive is that members of the Vale of Pickering Research Trust, Nicky Milner, York University, and compatriots Barry Taylor, Chantal Connier, and Tim Scandler Hall, who was excavated in the 70s and 80s, they've come up with a completely different history of this landscape, as we know, as we expect, different from what was believed before, that this was not a period of settlement. Now it is a period of settlement, hidden beneath thick deposits of waterlogged peat that had protected the normally perishable remains of the Mesolithic wood, plants, and animal products. They found evidence of a settlement which was massively huge, much greater than anything that even the likes of Graham Clark, I believe. Graham Clark wanted to prove that there were some kinds of Mesolithic settlements. There were well-preserved Mesolithic deposits. He proved it. But now we've gone even further than even anything that Graham Clark could have even believed. And this is the thing. They've also found signs of the earliest known house in Britain, long lasting and repeated occupation, along with a series of timber platforms spreading along the lake edge. So we've got platforms maybe all across the lake edge. This is something amazing. Moving along and looking at the foods and pioneering groups of people who invested significant amounts of time and labor in building long-lasting structures. And this is what we see. They're loving the landscape of Carr, but this is what Carr looks like today. Just green fields. Green and pleasant land, and in this land in ancient times, over in pastures, green and pleasant land, where today fields make up the Vale of Pickering. There was once a shallow inland lake measuring some 5 kilometers in width and 3 kilometers in breadth. Huge. And this sort of what lay beneath the peat. Now, we looked at this last week, but what I'm doing is expanding on everything that we did last week. Mesolithic inhabitant of Carr would be puzzled if told that the flat rectilinear fields that fill the landscape today were the site of his or her home. Peat made up of partially decomposed plant material, the remains of sedges, reeds, falling leaves, herbs, and aquatic plants, has remade the former landscape, turning it from open water fringed by swamp and woodland into pasture and plough soil. 1947, John Moore, this is him. This is his moment. A keen archaeologist, and member of the Scarborough and District Archaeological Society, was walking in fields when he spotted a single flint blade in a recently cut drainage ditch. Now, this is key. What was in the drainage ditch? The following year, he returned to the same spots to excavate Flixton Island, Site 1. There, he uncovered a dense concentration of early Mesolithic flint, the first hint of more substantial prehistoric activity in the area. Now, today, what we could do is core the landscape. So what we've got there at the bottom, we've got glacial clays. But what we've got above there, we've got the archaeology of this wonderful landscape, auguring this landscape. And their layered sediment cores preserve the remains of plants, insects, and aquatic wildlife, all clues to the Mesolithic environment. What we're going to do, we're going to talk about more, then we're going to have a break, okay? And then we're going to go on to Clark. Otherwise, we won't get this done today. Moore subsequently took numerous borings using an auger to gauge the depth of the peat and lake sediments of what he named Lake Flixton. By this means, he found Flixton Island Site 2, which he excavated in 1948. News of Moore's work then reached Harry Godwin, Cambridge University, Roy Clapham, Sheffield University, who were looking for sites from which to take pollen cores as part of their study of late Paleolithic and early Mesolithic vegetation. Godwin in turn tipped off his Cambridge colleague Graham Clark, who was looking for a Mesolithic site with well-preserved organic remains to study. When Clark wrote to him, Moore confirmed that he had found antler and bone. Amazing. Antler and bone, not really found before, other than dredging out at Doggerland, which could mostly could be later. But yeah, antler and bone, was being dredged up in Doggerland, Mesolithic period, and amazing. But Moore was finding it within an inland site. Clark had found his holy grail thanks to Moore, and wrote, "Here was a clue to something I had been seeking for many years. A British locality offering promise of recovering a settlement site with organic as well as merely lithic data." Now, this is one of the things we'd been finding this in places like Switzerland, but not places in Britain. So this is what Moore wanted to find. So as we sort of go down, amazing. Rising star. The name of John Moore is almost unknown in archaeological circles, but John Moore were mentioning him. It's thanks to him that we get this wonderful Mesolithic archaeology. John Moore's excavation reports were published in the Journal of the Scarborough and District Archaeological Society. Well worth trying to get hold of a copy of that. Announcing the discovery of the extinct lake and mapping its shores and islands. This guy was a pioneer. Yes, he was. By contrast, Graham Clark is a man of almost mythical status. The Oban Grubologist is based firmly on the work that he undertook at Carr between 1949 and 1951, under the sort of title of the Fenland Research Committee, a multidisciplinary body that brought together. Now, this is another thing. Right, going on to the wonders of Graham Clark now. Thank you very much, John Moore. He brought together a multidisciplinary team of archaeologists, historians, geologists, botanists, zoologists, glaciologists, and so on, in collective endeavors seeking a better understanding of ancient ecology. So he brought them all together. Graham Clark brought them all together. There you go. Clark and his colleagues began their famous exploration by excavating a single trench at a site where Moore had found intact bone. And bloody hell, Moore had found more than just intact bone. Look at it. Whoa! This sits at the edge of the irregularly shaped Lake Flixton. As Goff said, it looks a bit like Florida Keys. At a place Viking settlers had named Skedjer, which means sedge fen. So obviously it's still, there we go, isn't it? It was still fen-like in the Viking period. So, it's only more in the past hundreds of years that it's stopped being a fen-like landscape. Beneath the peat there, they found layers of brushwood, which Clark interpreted as a lakeside platform or occupation surface. So what we're going to do, guys, is that do you know what, I am absolutely knackered now. So I'm not going to get through all this today, and we will have a break, but I want us to have a very, very, very short break, and we're going to cue to you guys, and we're going to see that We're going to see Argyd wedi noed, Argyd wedi noed, Argyd wedi noed. Anar I chi barod. Yma. Iawn. Okay. Okay, nes y gael chi, Goff. What would you like to say?
I got no questions, thanks.
Goff?
No, nothing. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Beth ydi Bill. Bill, anything you'd like to say?
Well, I've just been with you 5 minutes, Carl. I assume you're at Star Car, I assume. Hello?
Yeah, we are. And we're looking at the one page. We're looking at Star Car. You know, the site that is still the site that we look to understand the Mesolithic period, but it's the site that's telling us that we've got permanent evidence of occupation of the Mesolithic period that we've seen with Hoyt. The reason why I've done Star Car now is that we've done a build-up. We've looked at the settlement at Lunt a little bit, which we're doing next week. We've looked at the western coast of the footprints, and we've got the settlements at Sefton on the west coast. We've got the settlement at Hoyk. And I wanted to say, when we get to Star Car, which we've done, we now know that although Graham Clark said that we had temporary settlements, Graham Clark was right, but we also had permanent settlements. So I wanted to build upon all that, and this is what we've done. So it makes what we've done today very understandable.
How far has Star Car advanced to the stage of a visitor experience? Can you visit the site? Is there some sort of visitor centre there? Do you know?
No, you've got to look at Scarborough. You've got to look at the biggest problem is we've lost an amazing archaeological university, Sheffield. York will remain an archaeological university, and Cardiff is next to go. Well, it won't be much of a loss, to be honest with you. But the fact of the matter is, we've lost a brilliant university in Sheffield. And therefore, we're looking at letting on the oldest of the funding that's required. It would be brilliant to think that a big visitor centre at Star Car. I will look at a little bit more into that in a minute, and I may have been incorrect in something that I've said. So I'm just going to check whether I'm completely correct on that, Bill.
You're breaking up a bit too, Carl.
Is everybody else hearing me, Goff? Am I hearing okay today?
He's off mic.
He's off mic. If I am breaking up, then I do have the ability to go over to the other technology now. So
it's only since I started asking my questions. Before then, your delivery was fine. But
you've
the last 2 minutes.
You've ruined the lecture.
I have.
Bill.
I have. Okay, then go for a cup of coffee.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to answer that question. Here we go. I'm just double checking about the visitor centre. I know there's something there, but I'm not exactly sure. Join. There's online stuff. I think yeah, the basis of what's available is in Scarborough. Fortunately not. The site is active. Oh, here we go. Can I visit the site, Bill? This answers it completely. Unfortunately not. The site is active farmland, and nothing of the original site or excavations remain above ground. You can learn about the site in museum exhibitions. Sorry, Bill, there's nothing.
So it's been backfilled. It's been recorded and backfilled.
Yeah, it's continuing to be excavated, backfilled every time. So it would be, to be honest with you, a visitor centre would be a good idea. But obviously, we waste money on HS2 and all the bloody rest of it, and there isn't the money available out there at this minute, and there's less and less money in archaeology.
Yeah. Okay.
So what we're going to do now is Atlantic Major. Can we have any questions from Karen, Lynn, Kathy,
Yeah, first,
Keith?
you keep breaking up. If the long period of silence or your voice is distorted.
Well, if somebody had actually told me, I could have gone over to the other technology. I'll go over to the other technology now. I will sign into the other technology now. So I'm going to do that. Somebody should have said ages ago. I could have easier.
That's message saying.
I can't get messages when I'm teaching. So I'm gonna sign into the other account, and I'm going to get us. I'm gonna get this clear now. So anything else anyone wants to say in Lantwit?
Yeah. What period are we talking about for the extent of the settlement there? Because was the houses that are built on the lake, are they actually contemporaneous with the settlement on the land, or there's 100 years between them?
Well, actually, that is a very, very sensible question, and that's something that we did actually discuss on Tuesday. What I am going to do is I'm going to go onto now. I'm going to see if I can get myself. I've got to work something out here in a minute. I've got an update I've got to do. But if you can hear this now, and I will get on. I got to try and get into this meeting. Right. Here we go. And I'm going to. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Right. Oh, shut up. I'm sick of your paradoxical nonsense, Keith. Right. Do you know what? That is a really good question. And what we're going to do, you wanted your break. You're not going to have it now. But what I'm going to do is a little bit of a whiteboard. We'll do this for a couple of minutes, right? So what you've got is you've got one type of settlement. You've got two types of settlements. You've got the platform bit, okay, and you've got the settlement itself, or indications of settlement. It's likely that everything is functioning at the same time within the backdrop of what's gone before. So I think the one thing that we can say is, as we've got very good preservation of the platform settlement as excavated by Graham Clark, it's logical to think that that must have been used for a very, very long time. If they decided that they were going to abandon this part of the settlement, they would have taken a lot of the timber to be used in the other settlements. So vis-a-vis, the evidence tells us that much of it might be contemporaneous, just being replaced and upgraded over time. There's lots of evidence of repairs on the platform, which is one thing that Graham Clark noted, that there was repairs on the platform. We're not going to get the evidence of repairs on the settlement because that's land archaeology. That is not organic. But I would say that the evidence is that we've got a massive thriving landscape. The other point I would like to make quickly is yesterday we asked the question, was there a population? What was the population size? And then I thought if you're talking about between 9,300 and 8,400 years up, start again. That's my BC dates. Start again. If we're talking about 11,300 and 10,400, which is a period of between 800 and 900 years, you're talking about roughly, I think, 55 generations. If you're talking about a population within that landscape of 55 generations, which is 150 is quite a lot of people. You can see that they may have lived at different localities and utilized and used the landscape, right? We don't have evidence. We've got evidence of a lot going on, but we don't have evidence of population numbers. But it's likely that lots of that is contemporary. Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question?
Sort of. Yeah, and the other thing, all those little dots that were on the map, all the dots, are they actually settlements or just where they found stuff?
Yeah, that's where they found flint in the samples. That's where they found flint in the field walking. So that could indicate anything.
Right, so in terms of actual buildings then, how many have they found?
They found in the region of 3 so far, but that's a limited excavation area. But they found more evidence of platforms all along that landscape within trial trenches. So you know, those platforms indicating more buildings and settlements nearby. So in other words, we've excavated 3% of the site. So if we think that is a representative number of what's on the site, there's going to be a lot more buildings. Okay.
Okay,
So
thank you.
so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break now for 5 minutes, and I'm going to have my drink. Hello, folks. Let's crack on with it. Let's get on. So, are we all there? Are we there, Goff?
I've just got to go away for 10 minutes. I've got an important phone call.
Right. Okay. Am I able to start or?
Yep, carry on.
Go ahead.
Okay. Right. And Bill, you're looking quite sexy as usual.
Well, I've been given blood, Carl, that's why I'm late. And I'm not going to be able to make every Thursday, particularly the first hour. So I'll keep that in mind. So if I'm not there at 10:30, right, just start without me. And like a bad boy, I might turn up or not.
Well, nobody likes a good boy, you know that.
Well, it's good to be naughty sometimes, as you well know.
Well, Bill, I wouldn't know anything about that.
We won't go
Right,
there.
so okay, let's crack on. Let's see what we're doing, and let's do the screen and start now. There we go. Right, so obviously back to this image so you've seen the image, Bill?
Yep.
So back to this image. So one of Graham Clark's excavation trenches, and we didn't really look into this much, but one of Graham Clark's excavation trenches revealing layers of wood. Now, Clark thought that the branches and trees had been laid as brushwood to stabilize the lake's margins. These timbers are now thought to have fallen naturally from the lake edge, but they overlie a substantial worked timber platform. So it's, in many ways, we're talking about sort of natural deposition, human deposition. There's talk as well that there's timber on the lake margins, and then we've laid timber on top of it, and then as the timber from the lake sort of deteriorates and falls in, and some of it's cleared and all the rest of it. After a while, the deposition on the lake is going to be completely without human interference. So you could understand this. So what we do see is returning to the site in 1950, 1951, Clark and his team found a wealth of work flint, butchered animal bones, and what is still to this day the largest assemblage of bone antler artifacts yet to be discovered from any Mesolithic site. Naturally, this is the site. 21 of those antler skulls, which we mentioned last week, the parts of the top of the skull and the antler thines coming off, have attracted the most attention because they had been worked in such a way that they could be worn as masks or headdresses. Clark thought they were used by hunters to get close to their prey, though he also suggested that they might have been used in ritual practices or dancing. Now, when he published his report in 1954, Clark interpreted Carr as a seasonal base for about 4 or 5 families, or even less than that, visiting the lakeshore over a period of 6 years as they followed migrating herds of red deer. This is what he thought. He argued that deer and humans came to the low-lying lake in winter, pointing to the fact that the abundance of antler tools and weapons at the site must have come from deer hunted between October and April, because these are the only months during which red deer carry antlers before shedding them in the spring. You could say a couple of things about this. I just got to write this in a minute. I just got to write this down just to remind myself. And if we go back to there. Right. So one of the things I sort of thought about on Tuesday was that maybe some of these antlers may have actually been shed naturally and collected any time of year. But what we're saying that Clark's evidence indicated that the evidence of occupation at this lakeside position, not the one inland that has been discovered recently, the evidence here was of temporary activity. However, However, when we start to interpret the landscape, things are very, very different. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you an image. We go slightly away from it. This is a site that was excavated in 1986. At the same time, they did some exploration at the site. This is at the carr excavations in advance of the development of the site as a waste disposal and processing plant for Scarborough. Now, this isn't too far away, and they thought that there might be some contamination further on down the line from carr to carr. And they basically thought, right, what we need to do, first things first, what we need to do, we need to excavate the site as part of the development. And we've also got to then see if there's any preservation of the archaeology at carr, which there was. And they started to think, right, okay, there is preservation at carr. It's worth preserving carr. It's worth preserving it from any threats that carr is seeing nearby. So threats to the former lake, every student of prehistoric archaeology since the 1950s has learned about Clark's work, naturally. Only the fortunate few have had the chance to go back and reinvestigate Clark's excavations. And to add, this is the point, to add to what Clark was telling us and further interpretation to a site of immense, huge, groundbreaking importance. So obviously we've got to be very careful of how much of the landscape is drained so that we can maybe investigate the archaeology more. We're not saying that carr is the only archaeological landscape from the Mesolithic period that we know about in Britain. There might be other carrs, but this is the one that we know about so far. And obviously the other land sites such as Hoyk and the ones near the sea marshlands at Sefton and Lunt and so on. So the new excavations came about in part because of concern over how the site was faring in the face of development pressures that included the construction of a 40-acre landfill and waste processing plant at carr, just to the north of carr. And the work was being undertaken at the locality in 1975 and 1985 by Tim Scahandler Hall, who did co-workings with Nicky Milner, led a program of fieldwork and excavations to sample some 2 kilometers of former lake shore and excavate sites in advance of the carr development, coming across very similar evidence, but not exactly the same as what we were saying with carr, obviously finding some bone evidence, finding lots of flint, but not an occupation site like the carr landscape, which we only know as they've only interpreted 1% of it. So what we thought about is that they decided they would extend the work to the entire shoreline of the ancient lake with excavations from 1985-1989 that uncovered further evidence of Mesolithic activity. These excavations also revealed the worrying fact that the shoreline peat deposits were drying up while the acidity of the groundwater was increasing, posing a catastrophic threat to the organic deposits that make the shores of Lake Vixton so special. So one of the things that we're going to do now is look at what they were seeing, what they felt, what they understood. So if we look at these two images here, what you can clearly see is you've got some of the text there. Clark's original trench on the left was re-excavated in 2010, so 12 years ago, in order to check the extent of any deterioration in organic preservation since the 1950s. Here, the same birch tree, there you go, are on the left and the right, first uncovered 60 years before 2010, can be seen. And you can actually see that what they've done is that bit, part of it is just completely gone. It's just completely deteriorated, right? Hang on. Are you all there still?
Yep. Yeah.
I had an annoying call through. So what you can see is that even, right, bits of that has been, right, get my words together. Sorry, I think Paul came in. What you can clearly see is if you want to compare, that part of that branch there is gone, right? Part of that branch there is broken down, right? You've also got bits of this branch that's draped on here, that's gone. I do believe that that's been cut through and part of that's been sampled, but you can also see the other bits of the timber further down have also likewise gone, and the preservation doesn't seem to be as good. Where that's clear there, that seems to be breaking down and eroding. So this is one of the things. Here, the same birch tree first uncovered 60 years ago is actually seeing clear signs of deterioration. Faced with that prospect, a university-based team led by Nicky Milner in the 2000s and Barry Taylor and Chantal Connier successfully applied for a major research grant to undertake new work at Carr, arguing that preservation in situ was no longer an option. So what they're saying, well, okay, this is the point. Usually when you are right, when you excavate an archaeological site, right, it's best to leave it there and to cover it up so future generations can come in. This was my big argument with what happened on the 5 Mile Lane. When they were excavating at the 5 Mile Lane, they could have saved all the archaeology by just gently excavating a bit of it and putting a membrane over it. So they decided to bulldoze it all and destroy it all. And now it turns out they didn't need to destroy or bulldoze any of it because the road itself turned out to be 2 or 3 meters raised above where the archaeology was. So again, another shoddy approach of the University of Cardiff to recommend that, where in regards to what the University of York is saying, which is a far superior university, what they are saying is that if we're going to excavate, right, we've got to preserve as much as we possibly can, either in situ or to raise it rather than to destroy it. So this is the thing. They were going in trying to, and what they wanted to take was block samples of the earth as well, which is revolutionary. So this is what they were doing in the 2000s. So they got major funding in the 2000s to undertake new work at Carr. As evidence that the threat was very real, they needed to excavate now to save what they could. They compared well-preserved bone and antler from Clark's excavations with soft, jelly-like collagen that was now turning up in test pits at the site, the result of acidic reaction with the mineral content of the bone. Further excavation was needed before all the organic data was lost, or to at least sample it. So what we've got is that between 2000 and 2010, the team started by re-excavating Clark's original trenches to study the extent of any degradation since the 1950s, and then extended the site to a much larger scale. Excavation that took in the dry land just above the lakeshore, and bingo, they found another archaeological site, a land archaeological site. So they extended beyond the brief of Moore's and Clark's work to find a land archaeological site. The most significant, the most recent work has shown that the extent of the Mesolithic activity of Carr has been greatly, massively, hugely underestimated. This isn't Clark's fault, because what he thought, this is a one-off. He was back then, we didn't really think much about landscape archaeology. He thought about individual archaeological contexts. So all things have changed. So we think about the landscape now, and that's the sort of determining factor. Firstly, and most significantly, the most recent work has shown that the extent of Mesolithic activity at Carr has been greatly underestimated. As I said, field work, walking surveys on dry land, this is what we discussed, above the lakeshore produced thousands of worked flints. Nearly every test pit produced worked flints. Test pits produced worked flints. In all, Mesolithic flint was mapped over an area measuring 2 hectares, and it was clear from this that the shore site activity represented only a fraction of the site, the use of the site. I think this is more that what we were getting at in regards to the question that wonderful Karen discussed earlier on. So what we've got is extending the excavation dry land, discovering a Mesolithic house. The remains of this took the form of a roughly circular series of post holes surrounding a hollow. The hollow was filled with dark soil that when analysed was shown to consist of large quantities of organic material, probably the result of laying down reeds or other plants to form a soft, dry floor. That's exactly what we see on the land site at Hawick, the 6-metre diameter building at Hawick, where we've got a depression in the middle. This thing about having soft floors is also a revolution in regards to this wonderful Mesolithic period, where we're seeing that these are just not normal roundhouses. These are houses that are meant to be comfortable. The superstructure probably consisted of timbers lashed together with nettle fibre or honeysuckle stems, thatched with reed. The position of the post hole suggested at least one phase of rebuilding, and several small patches of burnt flint were excavated in the area around the house, suggestive of hearths or campfires. So there's a lot going on, a lot of activity, lot of stuff happening, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to look at a reconstructed drawing now. Hang on. And what's happened now? Hang on. Okay, here we go. Hang on. Hang on. Right, there we go. My impatience. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to get this image off. Okay, right, okay. What's this? Not sorry, the image isn't going off. Okay, I'm struggling. Right, there you go. So what we need now is we need this. Right, this is the this is what we would assume is the reconstructed building at Hawick, Northumberland coastline. It's similar to the ones found at Carr. We made that parallel. This dates to 9,600 years, where the one at Carr, the landward site at Carr, dates to being 11,000 years ago. So, you know, again, this is a lot earlier. This is a land site at Hawick because it would have been far away from the sea back then as well. Carr site was probably about 20 miles away from the sea back then, and probably very similar to what we're seeing with Hawick. So down on the lakeside, evidence of sophisticated carpentry began to emerge as new timbers were revealed. Each of the post-1985 excavations has found sections of what appear to be a well-built platform or trackway extending for at least 30 meters along the shoreline, along the length of the shoreline. That's the other point I was trying to say. This was made from planks that had been split or hewn from a much larger piece of wood, such as a tree trunk or large branch, by hammering wedges into the wood, following the natural grain. Some of the planks were very fine, as thin as a modern plank, with edges that had been smoothed and shaped using a flint adze. The timbers had been laid with their smooth sides uppermost, their rough sides face down into the mud, hailed as the earliest evidence for carpentry in Northern Europe. These platforms represent a considerable investment of time and effort on the part of a large group of people. Such a finding does not fit easily with the idea of insubstantial transience previously attributed to the Mesolithic life. So there's a lot going on. There's so much going on more than we could have ever believed. There we go. There's the platform. Part of the platform excavated in 2010. This 2010 consisted of worked timbers and extended for at least 30 meters along the shoreline. You know, this is what they could see. You know, this is what they could excavate. Obviously, they haven't excavated the whole thing. So amazing. So we'll be coming to the end soon. So what is more, it appears that Clark's brushwood was also lying on top of worked timbers. When examining closely, the material that he thought had been cut and laid to consolidate patches of swamp to create a working surface turned out not to have any cut marks at all, making it much more likely to be naturally fallen material from lakeside trees. However, a detailed study of the pollen and charcoal from the site challenged another of Clark's conclusions, that the use of the site had been short-lived. So they're building their structures on top of all this deposition that had been naturally on the lake. The reed beds at the edge of the lake had been set alight and deliberately cleared over a very long period of time. perhaps to make access to the lakeshore easier or to promote fresh plant growth. Farming. By carbon dating the episodes of burning, a chronology was established for the intermittent use of the site over several decades. So we're talking, again, that time frame of this platform alone, the platform, not the building we just discovered, this platform of 11,300 to 10,400 years ago. So what we are going to do is we're going to look at this, which you know, we need to give our animals a bit more of a mention in our lectures, as I keep saying. Analysis of the bones from the site revealed the presence of migrant birds that only visit Britain during the summer months on this platform, while the plant material included species that only grow from the lake April to August. Right. Further evidence of summer occupation came from studying teeth of young animals whose butchered bones were found at the site. The extent of their growth and eruption showed that most had been hunted and killed in late spring and early summer. People were either living at Starcar all year round, or they were visiting the site repeatedly at different times of the year, and not just the months that Clark was saying between October to April. So, but then again, Clark was probably right as well. The one thing I think that Karen was actually getting at was that what we've got is all the layers of archaeology over a 900 year time frame. And the problem is, maybe what we're doing is that there are different things going on over different years, or maybe the same things going on different years. It's a wide site, everything getting confused. So we've got so much going on, so much archaeology, so much of interest. And finally, my lovers, this wonderful image here, rubbish or ritual. Clearly too, it was the site of many different activities. Pieces of antler, there we go, top part of the image. Waste surrounded by flint scatters show where the antler working took place across that platform, maybe at the land site, but that's gone now. Many of the work flint flakes and blades had signs of wear and damage along their cutting edge. Just the flint you will find at the other sites, indicating that they had been used for cutting reeds and wetland plants for thatch, flooring material, basket making, or food. The site produced barbed antler points, which are down, which is that one at the top. That's a barb antler point. Basically, these could have been used as harpoons for hunting beaver, fish, deer, or elk, and flints shaped for use at the tips of spears, which in turn applies the manufacture of wooden handles and shafts. So obviously, we got these points here at the bottom, antler points there. They're described also as bodkins that could have been used for sewing or as clothes fastening pins. We've got evidence of mattocks for digging. Wow. Agriculture, wedges for splitting wood, a paddle found. I think we've got evidence of a canoe now on site, and tools for scraping hides to make clothes, shoes, or tents. Ample bone evidence testifies to the range of food species consumed at the site, from large mammals such as brown bear, red and roe deer, elk, wild pig, cattle, to birds and small animals such as badger, hare, and beaver. One thing I would say, that some of those animals could have died naturally. They may not have been hunted. They could have brought the carcasses to the site to process. On that note, next week, we're going to start off with the words, many of the remarkable finds preserved at the site. And then we're going to look at one specific artifact, and that leads us into next week. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day now. And I want to know if there are any questions from anyone. Bill, have you got any questions, darling?
I did just thinking now, Carl, because Starcar was much earlier than Stonehenge, and the famous large roundhouse, even temple, if you like, could that have had the same sort of attraction for all the people living around there, or some sort of place to go to at certain times of the year to celebrate something, I wonder?
Well, the thing is, I've got to be honest with you, Bill, right? Celebration was last on their minds. Survival was on their minds. And I know what you're saying. I can see what you're saying. But what I do see is people needed somewhere to live. And this is the place.
Yeah.
This is the place. But we can
Yes,
easily
sir.
come to that question when we do Stonehenge, because I
Yeah.
think that's a question about Stonehenge rather than a question about this, Bill. This is a site that people lived, breathed, loved, died, and all the rest of it. We haven't found any bodies much, but that's life.
The other thing is, you
Go
can
on.
you can understand why the timbers had deteriorated after the initial excavations, because when they
Yes.
backfilled, presumably they put a membrane down.
No, they
Presumably
didn't.
they
they
didn't.
didn't.
Right, that makes it worse, because what you've done then, you've removed all the peat layers, which they're preserving layers, and you introduce an oxygen, which will accelerate any deterioration of the wooden timbers themselves. So,
Even if
so
you put the peat, even if you put the peat that they took off was removed back there,
yeah,
but then there's oxygen moved with it, and you are right. So
that's
every
right.
time that you expose the site, yeah. So the big
So,
question is what is the archaeology like in other places, and it has deteriorated even without archaeological excavation. So it's an overall thing, Bill. But you are right. When
so
you excavate, you will have
they would
deterioration.
have expected a degree of deterioration, obviously,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of that very reason. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah. Can with them all.
Yin and yang, Pete. Yin and yang, Bill. So anything else, Bill?
No, thank you.
Are you joining us tonight?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm here tonight. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, Bill. Thanks for joining us. And who else? Goff.
Yeah,
Say
sorry,
Goff.
I missed the visuals of that. I was listening, so I apologise for not being sort of there in spirit. Yeah, thanks. Great. And you're going to come back to that next week, you?
Yeah, we got to come back to it, and we got to do the pendant next week. So yeah, I didn't want to rush it. Okay, so let's see if there's anybody now in Lantwick Major. Anybody want to say something, Lantwick?
Any human remains found at the site so far?
We've got tantalizing human bones, but there's nothing really to say that there's any burials or anything there. So nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. This is the thing. The reason why I'm saying one or two human bones, teeth and the odd things, but not much in the way of burials. No. So if we want to look at a single set of human remains, I don't think we've even got one.
Okay.
So, anything else from wonderful Lantwick?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Oh right, yeah. I forgot Steve isn't with you today, is he? So
No.
yeah, no, Steve said to give his apologies. So I got Keith there, Kathy there. Is Lynn there today?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got obviously Karen, Chris is there, Jim, and Dell left us, whatever. So okay, then that's great. So what we're gonna do? Are there any other questions from anyone today? And I don't know what the hell happened to Dell.
No.
No.
I think he's
Okay.
gone after. He's got a new job in London. Plenty of parties, and you can get fondled if you want.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Well, at least there's not going to be a general election, and I do believe that Alan Carnes will be back in the cabinet. But I didn't say that.
Oh no.
Well, seeing as Alan Carnes is a good friend of mine,
This made my day.
so
Oh dear.
we need short people in the cabinet. They're all tall. So anyway, if there's no, well, he's also a friend of Goff. We do talk highly of him. So good old Alan. So Bill, everybody in Lantwick Major, Goff, I will see you all next week, no doubt.
Okay, ta-ra.
Thank you,
Bye.
then. Thank
Take
you.
care,
Bye.
folks. Thanks for your continued support. Take care, guys. Bye. Cheers, lovely. If we leave you now.
Well, yeah, fine.
Right, okay then. Anyway, everybody that's been watching on YouTube, thanks for watching on YouTube. Yeah. Thanks for don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm just gonna double check. Everything's done, all the house stuff done. There are no questions on here. Somebody said they put a question through about the class. It's not there. It's not there. Okay.